So, this is the photograph we took from across the street.
So you've got yourself a Pixel phone and you probably want to capture the best possible pictures whenever a picturesque photo opportunity presents itself. Well, you've come to the right place, because if you watch this video until the end and pay attention to the tips and tricks that I'm about to show you, you will become a Google Pixel photography perfectionist. And if you want to be a little more pro when it comes to capturing video on the device, then you know what to do. Stick around until the end. Okay, number one. So let's start with some powerful basics. Your quick settings are up here in the top left corner. So if you tap that, that expands the quick settings menu. But that seems like a lot of work.
I don't know, man. That sounds like a lot of work.
So here's the first tip for you. If you swipe downwards anywhere within the camera app, you actually get access to the quick settings without having to tap that top left corner. But you get the same result, and that is an instant win. And we will be using this quick settings menu several times throughout this video, so you're going to be using that trick a lot. Anyway, tip number two. So straight away within the camera app, we're going to use the trick that I just showed you. We're going to swipe down anywhere on the screen. We're going to go to more settings. Now within the settings on the camera app, we're going to the composition section here. And what I recommend you do straight away is make sure the framing hints are on. If this is off, switch it on right now. So by enabling this, you're unlocking an incredibly powerful tool in the form of this spirit level at the center of the display. It is invaluable because it shows you precisely the angle of tilt that you're using on your photo. And it will also show you how many degrees off axis you are with an actual number to represent it. And also when you're doing top-down shots, you get these little crosshairs to line up in the middle, and they'll let you know when you're holding the phone perfectly level. And if you want your Pixel camera to be perfectly centered, all you need to do is line up the lines here together. And when you do, you get a slight vibration to let you know that you've nailed it. Okay, now let's go back into the quick settings again, and we're going to more settings again, and we're going back to the composition section. And here, although this may sound counterintuitive, trust me on this one, switch off auto macro. So by doing this, you're not losing anything. In fact, you're gaining more control. And if you're not in control of the machine, then that means the machine is in control of you. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And the reason this is important is because when you're trying to take a photo in that close to mid-range, your Pixel will automatically sometimes, and quite annoyingly, switch to the macro mode without your permission. And this is bad because the macro image sensor and the optics in front of that camera are not as good as the primary camera. So if you are trying to take a photo in that close to mid-range where the primary camera can still grab focus, then most of the time it's better to take the photo with the primary camera. But with that said, the macro mode still has its place and its specific use case. So if we get really, really close up to a subject, see the little flower just above the center of the screen. If we tap that, that manually switches on the macro mode, and now we can get super close to whatever we're taking a photo of. So by disabling the macro feature, you still have the macro feature, but you can just use it when you intend to. So here's another one, and arguably the most essential composition setting that if you're not using, you're doing it wrong. It is, of course, the grid. So if we swipe down anywhere on the camera screen, we go to more settings, you'll see here, if we scroll down, in the composition section is grid types. So the classic setup is the 3x3 grid. With this setup, you can use the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds suggests that by lining up focal points at the intersections of these lines that are now on screen, you will become better at capturing more artistic photos and videos. And these lines can also be useful for leveling up horizons and leading lines within the shot you're trying to take. Okay, so compose yourself now and let's move on to the next one. So the autofocus on the Pixel is pretty phenomenal, but to master the phone's camera, occasionally you're going to need to turn off the guidance systems like a true camera Jedi would. So to track an object within the camera's viewfinder, all we need to do is tap the object that we want to track, and then no matter how we move the camera around, as long as that subject is still in frame, it will stay locked on focus on that subject. Now, let's say you want to fix focus on a scene and you don't want the moving objects in that scene to affect the focus. What you can do is hold your finger down on the subject and you'll see a little padlock pops up. Now the focus is locked there, and even if I move that out of the frame, whatever I replace it with will be in focus at that specific point because we have locked the focus in place. So I know you have the eyes of a hawk, and you probably noticed that when I touched the screen to focus, these extra controls popped up on either side. Most people won't even look at these, but you're not most people, and you're on your way to becoming a pixel camera Jedi. So here's what you need to know about these extra tools that pop up. And I got to shout out Defy Gaming for sending over this replica controller here with their Pope art design on it. If you guys want to get one of these, you can get this from Defy Gaming. So let's talk about these sliders. The one on the left is white balance. So if you slide it down, you'll see the picture gets cooler. Slide it up, it gets warmer. So you can use this for creative purposes, or you can use it to make the screen match more accurately what your eyes are seeing. And these other two sliders, the top one is your highlights. So if we turn that up, you'll notice everything gets a lot brighter and actually even a little bit overexposed. We can control the highlights and bring them right down as well. So you see how you can see the LEDs properly now on that little light rig I've got going on there. And these are the shadows. So if you want to crush the shadows and make the image much darker and gloomier, you can do that. Or if you want to lift the shadows, you can do that as well with these manual controls. And the reason I consider this an important thing to learn is because sometimes the AI can get it wrong. And for now, AI and machine learning do not rule the world of photography yet. So I recommend you make the most of the manual controls while we still can. Okay, so now you've got an excellent foundation to start creating your masterpieces. And unlike traditional single camera setups, you have multiple cameras and you can tap to go through these cameras like so. Or you can hold your finger down on this and slide and glide through a smooth zoom in a way without taking your finger off the display. Okay, so now let's unlock another feature that you absolutely positively should be using to level up your photography. So open the camera app, swipe down to bring up the quick settings, go to more settings. Now within this menu, you want to go to advanced, and here you'll see RAW plus JPEG control. I recommend you switch this on. So the Pixel phone by default will capture JPEG image files. These are compressed images. The downside to some of these images is the juice has been squeezed out of them. The upside is that they're compressed, which means they take up less space and it makes them more ideal for sharing. And to be honest, JPEGs quite often look pretty great. But with the raw image file, you get more juice in the form of up to 6 times more image data, which means you've got way more to play with. Now, disclaimer, raw photos are kind of rough diamonds, unpolished in a way. You will need to learn how to use apps like Lightroom and Photoshop to make these photos shine. And the great thing about this mode is that when you enable it, you actually still get the JPEG. So you get both the JPEG and the raw photos saved separately on the device. And when you enable this feature, the phone will automatically create a raw folder in your photo library where you can access them. Okay, now let's run through the quick settings that are available to you when you swipe down once on the camera app. So at the top, we have night sight. You can switch it off entirely, but to be honest, I would recommend leaving it on auto because night sight is absolutely phenomenal here on the Pixel device. You have the flashlight. The only time I recommend you use the flashlight is when it's absolute pitch black and there's zero light at all and you want to capture a photo. But apart from that, leave night sight on auto. Now you'll notice here we have the RAW plus JPEG option. When RAW is highlighted, you're capturing RAW and JPEGs at the same time. You can switch it off whenever you like. One thing to keep in mind if you are going to enable this and leave it on all the time is that it's going to use up a lot of storage on your device. But don't worry, I've got a really powerful storage management trick which I'm going to show you later on in this video, so stick around for that. So the Top Shot feature is a great one that captures multiple photos quickly so that you can choose the best one from the Top Shot lineup. And I recommend leaving this on auto. The only time I would recommend you switch it on permanently is if you know that you specifically need to capture multiple frames whilst taking a photo. For example, if you want to capture the disappointment on your partner's face when they realize that you got them a Christmas gift that you actually wanted for yourself. But you wouldn't do that, would you? And next up, we have a timer feature. So this is great for taking shots on a tripod. So you could set it to 10 seconds, trigger the 10-second time delay, and then run into the photo. And I just love how it shows the countdown number on the shutter button. And I also like how the flash blinks in time with the countdown. And some phones don't do that. So you could be standing there waiting for it to take a picture and not actually knowing whether it is taking a picture or not. And then the last setting here on the quick menu is the option to change the ratio to wide crop or keep it as full image. So my best advice here is always capture the full information. And then if you want to crop later on, do it afterwards. Okay, so remember Top Shot, which I just showed you in the quick settings. If you enable this next one that I'm about to show you, it disables this automatically. But don't worry, you can switch it on and off when you need it. So go to More Settings and then go to Advanced. And here you're going to see this, Social Media Depth Features. So this is a choice that you can make as and when you want to use it. But essentially what this does is it gives more information to your portrait shots specifically, so that when you import them into a social media app, let's say Facebook, for example, there is more information available to that app to create a 3D parallax effect that looks pretty spectacular. Okay, so remember what I said about JPEGs and how they are perfect for sharing instantly online. Well, if you set this next one up, you will become a photo sharing social media wizard. So swipe down on the camera app, go to More Settings. Now here, go to Social Share. Now what you can do here is actually select 3 apps that you use the most. And when you do this, next time you snap a photo in JPEG, you'll get the option to expand this menu here and automatically send it to one of those apps that you selected. So now you can share your photos with military precision. Smooth is fast, fast is smooth. Okay, this is just a quick adjustment that you might want to make. It's a good one in my opinion, but it's entirely up to you whether you do it or not. So swipe down, go to More Settings. Here, you want to go to Gestures. Now, as standard, the volume rocker is a shutter button, and I like that. But the double tap on the camera as standard operates a zoom, which is a bit tricky to use and doesn't always do what you want it to. So what I recommend you do is go to Gestures and change this double tap to Switch Camera. Now for me, this is just infinitely better. Now when I double tap the screen, it switches to the selfie camera, which I find way more useful. And one thing that I personally need help with when it comes to photography is perfecting the YouTuber face. I just can't do it. I don't know why. I just can't do a good one. Okay, so let's say you've just discovered that you really love capturing raw photos and then manually perfecting them after you've taken them, as opposed to letting the AI do all of the work. Well, if that's you, I'm happy for you. But what you might find is that your onboard storage is filling up fast, in which case you're going to want to use this trick. Go to More Settings, go to Device Storage, and listen here carefully because this is important. When you enable Storage Saver, all of your photos and videos will be compressed regardless of the settings that you might have changed before switching this on. But here is the magic trick. See this second switch at the bottom? If you enable this, the storage saver will only kick in once your device has just 1 GB of storage left. So think of this as kind of a contingency feature for your storage on your device. It's a last resort. And if you're worried about storage on your device, it might be wise for you to switch these both on. Now, here's a couple of modes that you should make the most of. If you slide across to the motion setting here, Google are still working on these. These are in beta phase at the moment, but they're already pretty excellent. In the motion mode, we have long exposure and action pan. Now, action pan is pretty awesome. It kind of gives you this speed look. The pixel will try to capture a freeze frame of an object and add motion blur to the background. So I'm going to attempt to do this here with this tennis ball. So I'm going to roll the tennis ball and snap the photo with this action pan mode. So you can see how it's kind of added a little bit of motion effect. This will work way better on moving vehicles or people running or something like that. But you can see what it's trying to do. So here's the shot without the effect and here's the shot with the effect. So the long exposure is great for capturing light trails. So if you're shooting a photo off of a bridge and there's cars driving underneath, or if you're shooting running water, this will give you a sort of smooth, smoky look. But like I said before, if you're going to use this, try and use a tripod. And here's another quick explanation of some fun features to try out when you get the time. Scroll all the way across to modes and you'll see panorama, photosphere, and lens. So panorama is pretty self-explanatory. All you do is follow the arrows around and you can create a sort of panoramic shot, which you can then swipe left and right on to see all the way around. Now, photosphere takes this to the next level because not only can you capture the horizontal areas around the screen, but you can also capture the vertical, and it kind of creates a photo bubble of the scene that you're in. And all you need to do is follow the dots around like that. And when you do it right, you get this kind of crazy photosphere effect. Definitely spend more time doing it than I just did and you'll get a better result. And the last mode, I'm sure you already know what it does. It's the Google lens. So if you see something and you're not sure what it is, you can open the lens and search using the photo for results. And as you can see straight away, this is figured out that this is a Metal Gear Solid figurine, even though his face isn't showing on this particular figurine. So one of the Pixel's strongest camera attributes is, of course, the night sight feature. Now, this kicks in automatically as long as you leave it on auto. But if you live somewhere where the skies are not full of light pollution, the Pixel's astrophotography capabilities are spectacular. And the astrophotography mode will kick in automatically as well, but it will only do this when it notices that the phone is in a fixed position on a tripod where it's not going to move. And my advice to you, if you do want to do some astrophotography, is do enable the RAW and JPEG, because you'll be able to bring more detail out of the raw photo once it's captured. And the other word of advice is to enable a timer, because once you set it up in a position, you hit the timer, that eliminates any camera shake that you might create by pushing the screen. And you will notice when night sight kicks in, because you get a little moon there on the shutter button, and you'll notice when astro mode kicks in because you will see some stars on the shutter button. And you'll also notice when you do night sight shots, the little number here in green, this is the exposure time that it's using. Because it's actually pitch black in the room right now, there's no light at all, it's at the maximum. We can reduce that manually if we want, and if it's not set to the maximum 5 or 6 seconds, you can turn it down or turn it up manually if you like. And when it comes to night sight, there's something else you need to be aware of. So when you're using the camera mode and it's dark, it's automatically going to activate the night sight mode. And when you use the drop down here, you've got the standard quick settings. But if you swipe across to night sight mode here, you actually get a different set of quick settings. And the feature that I want to draw your attention to here is the focus mode. So as standard, it's on auto. You can set it to near and you can set it to far. So if you're going to do astrophotography, you should set this to far, because you don't want it changing the focus point whilst doing astrophotography. And also double check that astrophotography is set to auto. And I did try to do an astrophotography shot last night to show you guys in this video, but unfortunately it was really cloudy, and also there's a ton of light pollution where I live. But check this out, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see Orion there, so the 4 corners, the belt and the sword. And in my opinion, astronomy is important because it gives us a sense of proportion. It reminds us of how little we really are, and people tend to forget that sometimes. And this YouTube channel is pretty little compared to others as well, so if you wouldn't mind helping me out with a little subscribe or a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. Now listen, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and in today's world of social media and tomorrow's world of metaverse, appearances can and will be deceiving. And if you just want to be or want to make people silky smooth, you can do it with this phone. So within the regular camera app or the portrait mode, if you swipe down and bring up the quick settings, you'll see there is the face retouching option. As standard, it's off. So if you want your photos of you or other people to be a little bit rough around the edges, then leave it off. Or you can set it to subtle, which is pretty smooth, or you can choose to make yourself and other people silky smooth. Okay, so there's so many tools available to you after you've taken a photo on the Pixel phone. And I'm sure you know about this, you've heard about this, but here's how to use the unblur, the magic eraser and the color focus, amongst other things. So go to your photo in your Google Photos gallery, go to edit. It will immediately present suggestions for you. This isn't all of the options, these are just suggested options. So to access the other tools, swipe across the bottom to the tools section, and now you see magic eraser, unblur, portrait blur and color focus. So with the magic eraser, it will assess the photo. If there's anything glaringly obvious ruining the photo, it will actually highlight it in advance for you. But if you want to manually remove something, you just draw around it with your finger like that. And there we go. It does the best that it can to patch it out of the image. If you're not happy with the result, you can always undo it. And then you can also use the camouflage. Now this doesn't actually get rid of the thing you highlight, it just kind of blends it in to the background, so it's not drawing the focus away from what you're actually trying to take the photo of. The problem is everything's kind of black and white in this photo, so it's not the best example, but you get the idea. Of course, if you have blur in the image, you can unblur it here. It will do its best to remove some of that and sharpen the image up. The portrait blur, if you've taken a photo in portrait mode, for example, here's a photo that I took the other day. I can go to edit here, scroll across to tools, go to portrait blur, and I can actually strip back the blur in the background if I want to, and bring all of that detail that's back there back into focus. So even when you snap a portrait photo, if you don't like the effect that is delivered, you can remove the effect entirely after the fact. And if it is a portrait photo that you're editing, you can also use the portrait light feature here, which kind of lights the shot for you. You can introduce light into darker parts of the photo or draw focus onto a specific part of the photo. And then you have the color focus, which desaturates the background but keeps the main subject of the photo fully saturated when it comes to color. Okay, here's a bonus tip for you and a word of advice. Try out the official Google Gallery app. It feels really well organized compared to the Photos app. Although it doesn't quite have all of the same features as the Photos app, it does have some exclusive filters and stuff which you don't get on Google Photos. So when you go to edit here, you'll see there are a bunch of different filters to use. And I do like the extra options that you get here. And here's another bonus tip for you guys. If you swipe down, go to more settings, scroll down to where it says frequent faces, make sure this is switched on. Because when this is on, your pixel will learn and perfect your personal skin tones over time and make you look better than ever using AI learning algorithms. So because you can, you should switch this on. So you've made it this far into the video. Don't give up now. Most people quit just before they're about to win. And now you're about to learn how to perfect the video capture pixel technique. Okay, so let's start the video capture section off with a very basic tip. Let's say you've got your phone in your pocket and you need to quick draw it and capture a video very quickly. What you can do is double tap the power key to open the camera, hold your finger down on the shutter button, that starts the recording. Now, if you slide your thumb down to where the padlock is, that locks the recording in place. And now you can play around with the zoom features by pinching in and pinching out. So that's a very basic way how to quick draw and shoot video in just a couple of seconds. Okay, so remember tip 1, when you swipe down on the screen within the camera app, you get the quick settings. The same thing applies here on the video option, except now we have a bunch of different settings. So flash, just like before, I'd only recommend you use this if it's absolutely pitch black or you're trying to film like a Blair Witch style video. You can adjust the resolution of the footage you're capturing. 4K is of course superior to HD, but it will use more space. Now this is probably the most important one you need to consider, and that's the frames per second, the frame rate. So 30 frames per second is kind of the best cinematic frame rate, but 60 frames per second has its uses, particularly if you're trying to film fast moving sports or fast moving cars. Because there's double the amount of frames, that means there's double the amount of data in the same amount of time. Everything will just look sharper. And just because it looks sharper doesn't necessarily mean that it looks better, but in some cases it does. For example, football or something like that. If you're not sure about this and you're not confident about what frame rate to use for what scenario, you could leave it on auto. Now remember what I said about raw photos and how they're kind of unpolished diamonds? Well, 10-bit raw video is kind of that same thing in the sense that it holds way more data than the regular video files. So when you import this into a video editing software, there's a lot more to work with. And this mode is very useful for bright shooting conditions. So that's pretty much anywhere else in the world other than England. And then this last one is a powerful tool, the speech enhancement.
This is speech enhancement. It's great for capturing clear speech in noisy locations. This is speech enhancement. It's great for capturing clear speech in noisy locations. It reduces unwanted sounds like wind, traffic, and crowds. It works best with a single speaker. So
speech enhancement is beneficial for noisy environments. However, I will say if it's quiet enough to not use it, then don't use it. You'll get a more well-balanced and natural audio with it off. And like the dude said on the phone, if there's more than one person talking, it's going to get confused. So definitely switch it off if that's the scenario you're trying to film. All right, this I believe is probably a trick that's under a lot of people's radars, and it works particularly well when you shoot 4K 60 frames per second videos. So let's say you've shot a really nice video, but at one point in that video, there's a perfect moment where everything is just right. All of the lighting, the facial expressions or whatever. Now, if you go to that video within the Google Photos app and hit edit, you'll see the option to export frames. So now what you can do is scrub through the video to the point where the perfect moment happened and then hit export frame. This now becomes a JPEG in your photo gallery. And if you open up the information on that photo, you'll see it's an 8.3 megapixel photo. If you do the same trick with a 1080p clip, it'll only be a 2 megapixel photo. So it won't be quite as high res as a regular photo with the regular camera, but sometimes the moment has already passed, and this is just a way to capture a freeze frame of that moment in time if you happen to capture a video and not a photo. Okay, this is just a quick one. Just like before when we were shooting videos, if you tap a focus point, you can lock the focus on a subject. So if you're filming someone and they're staying within the frame, you can actually fix the focus on that person, and that way no matter where we move, it keeps the focus on that subject. And just like before, if we hold our finger down on a particular point within the image, we can actually lock the focus at a specific point as well. So even if we take Wheeljack out of the photo here, the focus point will still be right there where he's standing. And just like before, when you do tap to focus, you do unlock the extra features here, the white balance and the exposure slider, so you can adjust for creative look or to match what your eyes are seeing. And if you ever feel like you've gone too far and you've completely ruined the image with the sliders, you do have these little arrows in the top corner that reset the sliders back to their default position. So you'll notice when you open the camera app and you go to the video mode that there's actually two options either side of the normal mode. There is slow mo and there is also time lapse. Now they're pretty obvious what they do, but just to give you a bit of clarity about the options you have here, in the slow mo you've got 1/4 speed and 1/8 speed. So the standard speed of the video camera is 30 frames per second. So if you set it to 1/4, that's 120 frames per second, which is pretty damn slow. But this phone can go even slower. It can go to 240 frames per second. You cannot change the resolution. It stays fixed at full HD, which is good enough. So when you capture a slow-mo clip, you can record it like this, hit stop when you feel like it's done, open the video, and now that you've captured the slow-mo footage, you can even adjust the point at which it slows down and create a kind of speed ramp look. So see these little triangles here at the bottom? Those are the points at which the slowdown happens. So it plays normally, hits the slowdown there, and then speeds up again. So if you're making videos with your smartphone, you can get some really nice B-roll using these slowdown options. And when it comes to time lapse, this is when you're filming a long piece of footage, but then it shortens it down for you. So let's say, for example, you're filming the sun setting and dropping below the horizon. You might want to set this to 120 speed. That way everything happens very quickly. If you know how long you're going to be shooting for, you can use the appropriate speed. If you don't know how long the clip is going to be, then leave it on auto and let the machines decide. Okay, so cinematic mode is a great video feature for shooting movie style content. It kind of adds a dynamic blurry background behind people or whoever you're filming. And when you switch between people, it will adjust that blurry background effect. So the great thing about this filming mode is it intelligently pulls the main focal point. This is the most autopilot video mode on the phone. The only thing you can really change is the flash. Listen, nobody's perfect, and one day you might have too many coffees like I do most days, and your hands might be quite shaky when you're capturing a video, and you might have forgotten to have turned on the proper stabilization mode for what it was that you were filming. And in those scenarios, what you're going to end up with is some really shaky footage. But all is not lost, because there is another feature here within Google Photos app that will allow you to correct this shaky footage. So to do this, if you go to edit, it will process the video, and then see this little rectangle with a rectangle inside it. If you tap that, this starts the stabilization processing after you've captured the video. So if you do happen to have shaky hands or you're addicted to caffeine, you're going to be all right, because this little trick here can save the day because once it's finished stabilizing the footage, the end result is a near perfect video. And on that note, if you've just got yourself a Google Pixel phone, this video that's on screen right now, the first things to do on the Google Pixel 7 Pro is the perfect video for you to watch next, because the Google Pixel 7 Pro is more than just a smartphone camera. And if you guys enjoyed this video, a little thumbs up and subscribe would make my day. And if you just did that, I will see you in the next one. Don't be late.